Yes, good morning. I believe it's good morning, everyone. I just wanted to step away from the from my IntelliJ for a minute, talk to my digital hustlers for a second. So, yeah, we're going to talk about tech today. React Native. We're going to talk about React Native for a minute. I don't have any notes because I know me. When I start talking about tech, I can go a little while. So, maybe the fact that, so if I write notes, I'm gonna go even longer than what I want to go. But we're going to talk about React Native, and let's talk about React because that's what it's based on. So, React is essentially a framework that intentionally or unintentionally replaced jQuery, which was dominant for a very long time in front end development. And when we talk about front end development, we're talking about the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript. That's kind of the trilogy that front end development is based on. So we're talking about websites, and we're talking about end user experiences. And of course, now since a lot of people interact with their mobile devices, we're not just talking about websites. Now we're talking about mobile devices, iOS, that includes iPhone, iPad, etc., Android. So we're talking about these devices and websites is just one component of the many, and so that's where the React Native comes in. So React is a lot of times people forget that it is declarative. Which means you can build a component and you can build a view with the components that you've built. Just stack them up, and React will take care of it. I probably should also say React started. It started at Facebook from the Facebook engineers, just like React Native started later. So the history is relevant because it kind of gets into some of the use cases for which React Native is used. And we got to talk about this. I'm sorry, like I'm going right into it unapologetically. The appetite for React Native is massive. I mean, just like y'all talking about the rappers and the sports stars and stuff, the appetite for this is massive, and people they don't know it. They don't know it. So I mean, would you rather be talking about something where the appetite's massive and everybody is familiar with it, or something where the appetite is massive and not too many people know it? You go to CNBC, they're talking about money. They got the little ticker symbols down at the bottom of the screen. They're talking about money. When we talk about tech, 9 times out of 10 we're talking about money, unless we're talking about brands, and then we're advertising somebody else's company a lot of times. But sometimes even the brands, we're still talking about money. We talked about QuickBooks Self-Employed, which leads to things like Sage Intacct and NetSuite and stuff. You talk about those things, you're talking about money. So React Native unapologetically, because tech is not something that just a handful of people care about. A lot of people care about it. So that's why we're talking about it. And see, just like we're talking about money. The mechanics, the mechanics of it, I should say, because anybody can talk about money. It's just how it's gonna get into your hand. That's what the interest. That's where the challenge lies into. So unapologetically, we're going to talk about React Native today. And again, it's built on React. You can go to, I want to say, reactjs.org to get the basic information. But all this is built on, it comes out of Node.js. So you got your basic front end development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript stuff we had a long time ago, to Node.js, which is another milestone. Then from Node.js to React, and then from React, we're going to talk about React Native. Okay. So the main thing to know about React is that it's a framework for building user interfaces via components that you construct, and they can be reused. And you get into things like React hooks, which is something we'll have to talk about another time. But all that stuff, again, the appetite for this stuff is massive. Because you get into React hooks, you're talking about state and easy ways of managing state. So React Native, Facebook. I want to say 2015. They wanted to build an ads manager application. So essentially, if you don't know what Facebook does, they run ads. So companies need to be able to create these ads and keep track of how well the ads are doing. Just be able to manage the ads. So they want to create an ads manager. They wanted that ads manager to be able to work on iPhone. At least iPhone. I mean, obviously you got Android devices, but you wanted to at least be able to work on iPhone. Now, they didn't have a whole lot of developers that could develop in Objective-C. They did have a ton of developers that knew React because that's their framework, so obviously they got people that know it. So they were able to figure out a way, and React Native started at a hackathon, just figuring out a way to reuse JavaScript code as code that can run on a mobile device and interact with the native components of that mobile device. So this was a big jump from Apache Cordova. With Apache Cordova, you're using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and all that, but the user experience on a mobile device, it was sufficient, but it wasn't. You could definitely run into some pain points, into some frustrations, because the interactions with the native components weren't as seamless as they wanted them to be. So React Native, took things a step further for that reason. Is the interaction with the native components on the device, the gestures and things like that were. Because if you're developing for Android and developing for iPhone, I mean, specifically, you're going to need two completely different apps. So with React Native, I can not only create React components for the web, I can also run this same app on iPhone as well as on Android. So you're kind of getting three apps in one. So just from a manager's perspective, and this is why we talk about money. From a manager's perspective, you're building one app instead of three. So imagine how much time you're saving in development and just overall skill, because so the same developer that's doing your React stuff can do your iPhone and your Android stuff. And yeah, I mean, your phones, we know how the phones upgrade and update, and sometimes they will have native components that you may have to create what we call native components for, and you're going to have to know the Objective-C in the case of iOS, or you're going to have to know the Java /Android SDK in the case of Android. But those are very specific limited use cases. So 95% of the time you'll be able to take that React Native code and be able to run it on either the iOS devices or on the Android. So we get into this thing called cross-platform development. That's what is meant by that. When people say cross-platform development, that means by platform we mean web, we mean iPhone, we mean Android, etc. So you're basically creating one app that can run on multiple platforms simultaneously. So you're doing a fraction of the development effort, and you don't got to be a rocket scientist to know that's going to save you money and time. So for a business person, that's very, very attractive. So with React Native, you start with that just like you start with anything that's Node.js based. You have a package manager, and just like you have a create React app to scaffold a React app, you got the same for React Native, where you can scaffold a React Native app. It's just as simple. So you can scaffold a React Native app. It gives you some of the basics. It even gives you a GEST unit test, so you kind of know how the unit tests are set up. So again, Facebook wanted to create an ads manager, and they didn't have Objective-C developers, so they were able to create an ads manager that could run on iPhone. Later, they was able to create an ads manager, and again, I believe this is 2015. They were able to create an ads manager that could run on Android. So that was the first kind of big React Native cross-platform app, according to Facebook. And it didn't take long before React Native became one of the most popular repos in GitHub. Which, yes, React Native is open source, which basically means that you can go to a repository and see the source code. That's what they mean by open source. So it is open source. So when people are talking about open source, that's what they're talking about, that they can go somewhere and see the source code. And in many cases, you can actually contribute. Just like recently, there was a pledge, I think first taken by Facebook, to make React Native more accessible. And by accessible, it means, people of, sometimes the older people have a hard time working with the apps that are created nowadays. So by accessibility, and not just old people, I mean, different groups have different needs in terms of, and some people may don't see colors that well. So they need a stronger contrast. Point being that you get open source, you can get a community to contribute and add things, add documentation, and improve the product, so that Facebook's not doing all the work. Because I think Facebook we're already no longer officially supported. I'm sure they'll support it in some capacity, but they're no longer officially supporting React Native. I think they stopped that in January. But I mean, you got some stuff out there that'll keep React Native going. In fact, I think the Shopify engineers have committed strongly to React Native. So just like any technologies, people may use them for a few years, they may move off of them. Some companies will move on them, commit to them. That's just the way it goes. For example, Airbnb, they had committed to React Native and they used it, and now a year or two ago they decided to go into a different direction, and they actually said why. And Airbnb is one of those, their engineering department is kind of leading edge, so they're always adopting technologies and trying different things, so that's not a big surprise. But Shopify they've definitely committed to React Native and committed to using that. And again, React Native, to reiterate, cross-platform app development. You're talking about one code base that can be deployed to the web. You can go into a browser and bring it up. You can go to your iPhone and pull it up as an app. You can go to your Android and pull it up as an app. One code base, the three places. So again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know how attractive that is. Now, in terms of the ecosystem, I just wanted to mention a few things. You always have competitors. I'll just say quickly that Flutter is a competitor. I'm pretty sure Google's behind that, and still is. Well, Google started that and is still behind that. So that's one thing that if people are not using React Native, some people have decided to use Flutter. So it's good to be able to compare and contrast two frameworks. Now, you also have in the React Native ecosystem, You got places where you can go and get React Native templates, some that you can buy from anywhere from $50 to $100 to like $500, just depending on what you're trying to do. So the templates allow you to get started quickly with React Native. You don't gotta go into into the design and stuff like that, or the design is minimal. Now, what you also have is something something called Expo, which I think a lot of you all will find attractive. Because when and this is probably the last thing I'll mention, because when you're developing with React Native, you're typically developing on a laptop. Now, if you're developing on a Windows laptop, I strongly suggest you check out Expo, because it's very difficult to develop. For obvious reasons, it's very difficult to develop iOS apps. By iOS, again, iPhone, iPad, etc. It's difficult to develop those kind of apps on a Windows laptop. So Expo streamlines that, a lot of the configuration required to do that. Because if you're when I mean configuration, I'm talking about things like Xcode and just a lot of the things. And on the Android side, you're probably going to want to download the Android Studio to develop on an Android app. So you're going to need all that stuff on your laptop if you don't have Expo. So if you have Expo, it kind of eliminates a lot of that configuration, so you can go directly straight to the actual development of the React Native app. I think you all find that attractive. There may be some cases where you want to do that. You don't want Expo. You want to actually configure the platform specific configurations. That's fine, but particularly if you think you're interested in React Native, you want to use it, I think the Expo will be a good way to get started quickly. And that's at expo.io. And this is something that, we're just talking. The React Native developers aren't giving me a check. Expo isn't giving me a check. I'm just talking about stuff. That's why I don't mind mentioning stuff like Flutter. So I will be publishing. We will be publishing an article on React Native pretty soon. There's some additional details we're in the final stages, but there's some additional details we want to put in. So a lot of this stuff will be talked about in detail in that particular article. And when that happens, I'll let you know. We'll post a link to the article to let y'all look at it. But I'm gonna let y'all get back to what y'all doing. I know y'all got a lot of stuff to do, as do I. So let's get to it. Peace.